If you're regularly using DaVinci Resolve, especially for doing work as a colorist, here are my 7 tips to help you work more efficiently and have a better time making cool stuff. This has all come from my now 7 years experience in the program, mainly working in advertising and short films, and my fingers are crossed you can find something on this list that you don't already know. But if you do know it all, that's kind of even better because it means you're really knowledgeable and ahead of most people using Resolve. So here are my pro tips. Tip 1 is turning off autosave. Over the summer, I recently wiped my entire system and started over with a fresh install of Resolve, and by default you have autosave turned on. This means you don't need to worry about saving when you're working because Resolve does it automatically. Upon closing the app, it saves your progress and you can just jump back in next time from where you left off. Sounds great, but in reality it's caused me more problems than it's solved. By using autosave, you're effectively losing control of when to save your project and when you might want to actually revert back to where you began. It might sound picky, and there are multiple ways to revert back in Resolve. You can turn on timeline backups individually and also go to File Revert when in a session. However, by turning off autosave, you're effectively back in control of when your project is saved, and this can help if you just want to trial a quick tweak or you simply aren't happy with what you've done. That prompt at the end forces you to make a decision, and you might appreciate having the option compared to having it done automatically. Thankfully, even with the setting turned off, Resolve will automatically conduct backups periodically, and in the rare event of a crash, I've never lost more than a few previous actions. Compared to the old days of using Adobe Premiere Pro, Resolve is much more reliable in this aspect. Keyboard customization is something I recommend everyone do in Resolve. By going up to the DaVinci Resolve menu and keyboard customization, you're presented with all the commands which can be mapped onto your keyboard. Some already have shortcuts assigned, some you definitely won't need or use, so it's not worth adding shortcuts for, and others can be useful for mapping it to an accessory like a Stream Deck. Here, I've added a shortcut for muting audio mainly when I'm color grading, and I have this mapped to a button on my Stream Deck, so I don't really need to remember the keyboard shortcut itself. Once you're done, head up to the 3 dots, hit save as a new preset, and you can then hang on to these shortcuts or export them to other systems you might be working on. It's all pretty self-explanatory and straightforward, however DaVinci Resolve keyboard shortcuts can also change. It's something I didn't notice until recently because I did a short on the auto color feature in Resolve. It used to be mapped to the C key in older versions, but upon reinstalling, I noticed it's now Option or Alt Shift plus C. If you have your own profile, your shortcuts are effectively locked in and won't change with updates. Therefore, it's good practice when Resolve gets a big update to go through the default DaVinci Resolve list and see if any of the new features have been mapped to new shortcuts or shortcuts have changed. You can then adopt these into your own preset by manually adding them in. You won't know unless you check. In Resolve, it's quite common to work on one clip and then copy a grade to another. The way you do that is by selecting your ungraded clip and then using the middle mouse button to click on the graded clip you want to transfer it from. But when I did this, I noticed something else was happening. Shots that had stabilization applied in the edit page would suddenly be unstabilized and would require me doing the stabilization again. The reason being is by default, Resolve is also copying over the sizing of the graded clip, but you can change this by heading up to Mark, Keyframe Timeline Mode, and changing it to Color rather than All. Now, when you middle mouse click, it won't ruin any of your previous stabilization work. When I was training to be a Resolve colorist, I remember reading the manual and following all the training exercises. This was a great way to learn the program, and I definitely recommend it as a starting point for most people. One of the things mentioned there is still one of my most used shortcuts when grading. It recommended you to map the Tab key on your keyboard to the Label Selected Node command. So if you're creating a new serial node with Option or Alt S on your keyboard, you then hit Tab and you can rename the node straight away. This saves you endless time having to right-click each node and hit rename manually, plus it reduces so much friction when organizing your node structures. Following on from that, don't keep manually drawing the same power window you use for vignettes either. In Resolve, draw the shape of your vignette used the most often, make sure you invert it, and then hit the 3 dots in the corner and select Save as a new preset. Now you can easily recall these power windows later rather than drawing them each time. Just be aware these are resolution dependent, so if you create a vignette for a HD clip, it won't automatically upscale into a 4K timeline. The way to address this is by adding multiple presets for different sizes. It does sound like more work, but long term, it'll still be much more efficient than starting from scratch each time. Power grades in Resolve are really easy to create, and I recommend everyone to utilize them to make your own presets for the nodes and node structures you use the most often. For example, I often start a lot of my tutorials showing me adding a color space transform from the OFX panel to convert my footage over. Mainly, I do this so everyone can understand the entire process, but when actually grading, I have a whole bunch of these presets to make the process much more efficient. The way I like to create and organize them is to go into the edit page, create a title of what the power grade will be, create a new compound clip with the title because you can't add a node to titles on its own, then head into the color page, add the node or node structure, and then right click and hit grab still. From here, drag this power grade into another folder rather than the default stills one, which will allow you to access it across all your projects. When you want to utilize it, you can simply click and drag it over or hit the middle mouse button to replace the entire grade with that node structure. Trust me, this will save you endless amounts of time. In Resolve, there are many ways to skin a cat, so to speak. Sorry, cats. But many of the tools can accomplish similar tasks, so it's important to experiment and see what works best for you in any given project. Lift, Gamma, and Gain are the most basic tools which do exactly what they say on the box, whereas log wheels more accurately allow you to target smaller parts of the image. And finally, HDR wheels are color space aware, meaning their behavior changes depending on what color space you're working within. None of these are necessarily better or worse than one another, but you will find over time you'll develop a preference for the way you like to work. For example, I really like linear gain for balancing my shots, but it's also not incorrect to use HDR offset or even white balance and tint. What I will say is, as a colorist, speed is of the essence, so choosing tools which help you work faster are going to be better than tools which add more time to your grade. It's one of the reasons I try and stay away from qualifiers unless I'm just trying to address one problem in one specific shot. Whereas for my look development and grading, I'm always choosing methods which will easily ripple out to an entire grade. I know it's kind of a cop-out tip and a discussion for future videos, but make sure to experiment with all these tools. Also realize a lot of YouTube videos which show colorists with these elaborate node trees and spending 15 minutes on one shot are somewhat unrealistic unless you only have a handful of shots or unlimited time to finish a grade. Otherwise, work towards finding tools and workflows which give you the best results in the shortest amount of time. So there you have it, 7 tips from my 7 years to help you become a better colorist. I'd love to know what your favorite is, or if you've got another one that you'd like to share, please leave it in the comments down below. Also, make sure to subscribe for more videos coming very soon, and I'll see you all in the next one.